It's been a little over a decade since Harry Potter's world of witchcraft and wizardry came to an end, but thanks to J.K. Rowling and the magic didn't end there. The Fantastic Beasts series picked up the wand not long after and gave us another round of awesome spells, magical creatures, with a brand new Brit wizard. Today we're talking about the behind the scenes of the magical world to show what it's like without the green screens and special effects. First up, a swaddled baby light. While many movies totally rely on CGI to bring certain scenes to life on screen, the Fantastic Beasts movie, despite being set in the world of wizardry, doesn't. Well, at least not entirely. You'll be surprised to know that most of the magical scenes include some elements of practical effects. Remember when Newt steps into the suitcase in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them? Much of Hermione's tiny bag in the Harry Potter series, his suitcase contained an entire world of fantastic creatures inside. There's a scene where Newt picks up a baby of some sort and goes on nursing it. The creature itself was totally CGI, of course, no shocker there. The filmmakers added that later on, but did you know that they had Eddie Redmayne's character hold on to a swaddled light in place of the creature? Yeah, turns out he was holding and feeding a wrapped up light source at this time. The magical creature was supposed to emit light, and the team thought it would be perfect to bounce some natural light on the actor's face. Next is Newt's Thunderbird. Among the many fascinating creatures featured in the first film, Newt's Thunderbird, Frank, was hands down one of the most majestic ones. You could call it the deus ex machina of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Safe to say, bringing him to life was a lot of work. The Thunderbird had to be animated from scratch. To get the giant bird soaring through the sky, the animators had to form a rough, colorless creature first and add on the lifelike details later. While Frank himself was a pretty big creature and required countless hours of work before we could see him on the screen, it was his surroundings that truly challenged the visual effects team. They couldn't exactly film the bright New York City as it is today. The Fantastic Beasts series are set way before the Harry Potter saga, in the 1920s. So not only did the animators work on the big magical bird, but they also had to create the backdrop of the old city. Only after they were done with the background of the aerial shots did they animate Thunderbird. Next, throwing it back in time. The huge time jump was arguably one of the most striking elements in the film, mostly because the 1920s had such a distinct and instantly recognizable style. But the Fantastic team ended up nailing the whole vibe and look of the era. Of all the things on screen, the old skyline looked pretty darn realistic. The filmmakers brought in Rodeo FX to recreate the New York of the 1920s. In addition to some shots of Broadway, the team also created the entire interior and exterior of the Woolsworth building, along with the interior of the Magic Congress of the United States, or MACUSA. Interestingly enough, they took some inspiration from Hogwarts Dining Hall for the Magic Congress, and believe it or not, the entire thing was 100% CGI. Without all of the nifty graphics, the Magical Congress would cease to exist. Now we have Jacob and the world inside Newt's suitcase. We're back to Newt's magical suitcase. One of the joys of being a fan of the Potterverse is that you're hardly surprised by magic, but get to witness how muggles or non-mages react to discovering a hidden world. Like when Jacob Kowalski saw the inside of the suitcase for the first time, his face said it all. But your perspective will surely change once you realize what Dan Fowler was acting with. The suitcase world did have some physical aspects, like the luscious green landscape, but that was pretty much all the actor had to work with. That and Eddie Redmayne, of course. Everything else that blew him away was just markers on a big blue screen. Next, Newt and the magical creature he's thrown on. We guess one of the reasons for casting Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander, aside from the accent of course, is that he throws himself into his work quite literally in the scene we're about to mention. During the first Fantastic Beasts film, our favorite magical zoologist is forced on top of one of the magical creatures. Turns out it was just a giant green mass. The filmmakers created it to act as the creature that would later hoist Newt in the air. A behind-the-scenes picture revealed Redmayne hovering on top of the green thing without any safety wires. We're assuming that was to get his full emotions on screen. Up next, Niffler, the cute thief. The cute little Niffler has become such an important part of the franchise. Who knew that out of all of the majestic creatures the CGI team brought to life, it would be the honey badger-like thief that would become a fan favorite? Naturally, of course, the Niffler doesn't exist, so the team had to whip him up from scratch. Apparently, the special effects team saw some footage of a honey badger raiding somebody's house with an insatiable desire to find food, and that's what they based the little character on. While working on the computer-generated creature, they had to treat him as a living, breathing animal. So to make it move exactly how a real mammal would, they animated all of his muscles first. The muscular structure showed the FX team how each body part of the Niffler would move when in action. The rest of the defining features like skin, hair, and eyes were added later on. Now, the deadly liquid floor. The scene where Catherine Watterson's Tina is put in a chair that will take her life is yet another instance where the filmmakers decided to combine the real with a little bit of CGI. Turns out the crew created a very detailed set for the scene. Filmmakers even roped in 2 guys to hold a platform for Tina to jump on when she escaped. They were eventually edited out of the scene later, so pretty much everything you saw on screen was actually there off screen, except for the deadly liquid floor. That was all CGI. Up next, the Erumpent and the snow-covered park. Behind the scenes footage of when Jacob and Newt are trying to capture the big Erumpent reveals something very different than what we saw in the movie. While the creature itself was obviously CGI, we mean there's no way anything remotely similar to the half-elephant, half-rhino with a glowing liquid sack on his forehead actually exists, but the clumsy and frankly a little comical creature wasn't the only CGI in the scene. While the walls and the broken bits in the background were practical effects, they were the only real thing on the screen. Everything else in that scene, the park, the snow, the surroundings, was CGI. So not only did Redmayne have to pretend to chase a magical creature, but he also had to act as if he were outside in the snow, when in fact, he was just surrounded by green screens. We've got to give him props for that. Now we have the Goblin Gangster. The super realistic gangster goblin, Gnarlak, who was based on Ron Perlman, and to bring him to life on screen, the CG team had to take him down to his core, quite literally. According to one of the post-production videos of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Gnarlak's skeleton was the first thing the FX team created for the character. They wanted to get everything right, down to the last detail, which is how they ended up studying a goblin's anatomy. Even though it's only slightly different from humans, they had to know how the goblin's body and his physique would allow him to move. Talk about detailing. The team added on some muscles to Gnarlak's skeleton, which not only filled out his body, but also decided how much weight the gangster would carry. And lastly, cars from the past. One of the easiest ways to tell which era a movie is set in is by looking at the cars on the road. Since the first Fantastic Beasts movie was set in the 1920s, and quite a lot of it was shot on the streets in between Muggle traffic, you'd think the filmmakers went all out with the CGI cars. But apparently, aside from a few computer-generated cars, the rest were very much real. The team went through a long process of acquiring just the right vehicles for the set. Not only did they get their hands on regular cars, but the crew also had to find police department cars. Interestingly, some of the cars were props, which were used for minor interaction with the actors. That's a wrap for today's video. Turns out the magical world is very different behind the scenes, minus all that fancy CGI tricks. Which of the actual scenes surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.